If you're planning for retirement and wondering how much you can safely spend each year, then this video is for you. You've probably heard all about the 4% rule. It's one of the most common retirement income strategies out there. But here's the truth. Many retirees end up spending more than 4%, not because they're reckless, but because life doesn't always follow the math or the plan. I'm a certified financial planner and Wealth Associate at Confidence Financial Partners. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through when and why it might actually make sense to spend more and how you can do it confidently without running out of money. Because most retirees shouldn't follow rigid formulas. Now, if you had an advisor show you a Monte Carlo score or mention the 4% rule and you still felt a little uneasy about it, you're not alone. I'll introduce you to a more flexible approach to retirement spending using what we call risk-based guardrails that allows retirees to live more fully without compromising long-term security. So you see, the 4% rule is a widely used guideline in retirement planning. It suggests that if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio in the first year of retirement and adjust it for inflation each year after, you'll have a high probability of not running out of money over a 30-year retirement. This rule came from the Trinity study, which tested various withdrawal strategies using historical market returns. It became the de facto rule of thumb for retirement planning, particularly in the DIY or do-it-yourself community. But the 4% rule does have some serious limitations. It assumes static spending, meaning your expenses don't really change over time other than just adjusting for inflation. And it also assumes a very particular and constant portfolio allocation. And as with most things, it assumes a 30-year longevity across the board. And it doesn't really account for dynamic life events like market volatility, health surprises, or maybe lifestyle changes. Most importantly, it doesn't manage the sequence of returns risk, which is the risk that you retire just before or during a market downturn, when your portfolio is potentially the most vulnerable to early withdrawals. So in a world of rising longevity, changing market dynamics, and more personalized goals, the 4% rule just doesn't fit most real-life scenarios, at least in my opinion. Here's what I've heard from working with people in retirement. Very few of them want to simply preserve their capital. They want to live their lives. They want to travel. They want to help their children or grandchildren, and they just want to enjoy retirement, not just survive it. Let me share with you a quick example. There's a couple that I was previously working with, and before they were kind of do-it-yourselfers, and they were sticking to the 4% withdrawal rate from their portfolio. The reason we were talking is that they were interested in about funding more goals than they were currently funding. They were delaying trips and they were unsure of whether or not they could afford their home updates, meaning they were just living well below their means just in case because they were worried about running out of money. And so after working together and building out a financial plan, it became clear that they were actually probably underspending based on their goals and what they wanted to do early versus later in retirement. Because for them, it was important to be able to use their money that they saved and invested wisely to be more active during the healthiest and active parts of their retirement. And unfortunately, they felt like they were already starting to miss that window of opportunity. And this kind of story isn't really rare. Research from Derek Tharp and Michael Kitces shows that retirees often underspend due to a fear or rigid adherence to certain planning models like the 4% rule or maybe the Monte Carlo score. Many spend far less than they could probably safely afford, especially in the earlier parts of retirement, just because they're worried about this. And so this brings us to a better way of thinking about retirement spending, which is the retirement spending smile. Research from Michael Kitces and others shows that retirement spending tends to be highest earlier on in retirement when people are most active, like we had just mentioned. Then it gradually declines in the mid-retirement years before potentially ticking back up again at the end of your plan due to healthcare costs later on in life. This arc, or spending smile, has early high spending, middle year lower and stable spending, and potentially later life health expenses. And that's why they call it a smile. The traditional 4% rule ignores this, or at least doesn't account for this. It assumes that your spending is going to be flat, inflation-adjusted spending over 30 years. But that's not really how life works. Understanding this spending smile can allow us to front-load retirement spending while maintaining overall stability within your plan, as long as you're willing to be flexible in your retirement spending. You're more than likely to want and enjoy your money in the first 10 years of retirement, and you should be able to build a plan that supports that. Now, if this type of retirement spending resonates with you, but you're not really sure how it might relate to your overall plan, you might find value in my retirement readiness review. It's a personalized video where I'll break down your retirement outlook and highlight potential blind spots. I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to learn more about it. So let's talk about a more adaptive system, which we like to call risk-based guardrails. Unlike the 4% rule, guardrails allow retirees to adjust their spending based on how the market and their portfolio is performing. So here's how it works. Your first step is to define your guardrails and we use the Monte Carlo score to do that. Now, the Monte Carlo simulation score is used to test retirement plans to give you an idea of if your plan is going to be able to support your spending over time and if you might need to make adjustments in the future. So instead of just treating this number like an output or just a probability of success score, we use it to set guardrails. So an example of spending action guardrails could be if your score is 90% or higher, you might consider a spending increase or special expenses that you hold off on. Now, if it's between 75 and 90%, maybe you just maintain your baseline spending, staying steady and on track. And maybe you put in, if it's between 60 and 75%, you kind of enter a caution zone where you evaluate the potential modest cuts to spending. And if it's below 60%, then maybe you look at taking more drastic reductions in your discretionary spending. Now, of course, these thresholds that I just kind of walked through are adjustable depending on your risk tolerance and your goals and the lifestyle you're trying to lead. And then the second step would be to make sure you're scheduling regular reviews. Me personally, I like to run and rerun Monte Carlo analysis scores at least once or maybe even twice a year. This way I'm able to track changes and respond only when a score crosses a certain threshold that we defined earlier. No guesswork, no panic, just informed, measured responses. Now, the third step is to align your spending to your needs, wants, and wishes. In your planning software like Money Guide Pro, you can label spending goals by priority. So your needs are going to be your essential monthly expenses that you really can't do without. Your wants are going to be more of your lifestyle preferences, maybe travel, hobbies, things like that. And then your wishes are going to be more of those one-time projects or luxury items that you want, but maybe you aren't looking at buying right away. So then when your plan score hits a guardrail that we set, your plan's going to adjust accordingly. For example, if your probability of success score falls below 60%, maybe you delay a home renovation that you're looking at, which might be a wish. Or if your score climbs above 90%, you can maybe get the green light for an extra family vacation or buying that car that you really want. Then the fourth step, and this is really where working with an advisor comes into play, is just working on communication and making sure you document the plan. It's not a one-time set it and forget it type of activity. So this system really works best when clients understand that it's not about predicting the future, because no one can do that. It's about staying flexible. And so a Monte Carlo score is not just a pass or fail. It's a signal, and the signal is for adjustment. And so I found that clients gain confidence knowing that there's a process to adapt to market changes and their lifestyle changes that's going to work with them and not make them work for it. So let me give you a quick example or a case study to kind of put a story behind some of these numbers. We'll call this client Carl Confluence, which is a fictional client, of course. Carl's 65 with a $2 million portfolio, and he needs $90,000 coming out of his portfolio. So let's say his probability of success score, or his Monte Carlo score, is 88%. So at 88%, we're probably going to work with Carl to maintain his current level of spending, adjusted for inflation, of course. But let's say over the next couple of years, the markets start to outperform and it pushes a score into the low to mid 90s. Well, at that point, we'll be working with Carl to say, let's start looking at increasing your discretionary spending. And that's where it really gets fun. Whether that's gifting to his family or spending more on travel or just creating memories that him and his wife or his family can share. That's the fun part about retirement planning. And then let's say a few years after that, if there's a market downturn, maybe that brings his probability of success score into like the low to mid 70s, for example. Well, at that point, we may pause his spending on his wishes and maybe revisit those next year. And if his score continues to drop, maybe into the high 60s due to the market downturn, then we may look at pulling back his discretionary spending by maybe 5 or 7%. Based on the thresholds that we set. And so really what this is doing is it's putting a process in place and removing the guesswork. And it allows our retirees to focus on living and not stressing. So yes, throughout certain years of retirement, you may end up spending more than 4%. Maybe it's 5, 6, or even 7% in certain years. But that doesn't mean that your plan is broken. It means that you're adjusting in real time, just as any good retirement plan should. So if this video helped you think differently about retirement spending, I'd encourage you to subscribe so that you don't miss future videos on preparing yourself to be retirement ready. And if you want help evaluating your own retirement readiness, I'd be happy to send you a retirement readiness review video of your specific situation. Like I said, I'll put the link in the description if you're interested in that. I appreciate you watching. I hope you found value in today's video. And as always, great days ahead.